The Peaceful Mother. Hello, and welcome to The Peaceful Mother, where I empower you to go from reactive parenting to proactive parenting, helping you heal old wounding and teaching you how to regulate your nervous system so that you can show up as the peaceful parent that you aspire to be. I'm Emily. I am a parenting coach, a trauma recovery coach, and author of The Angry Mom's Guide to Self-Regulation. You may already know me from my Instagram or my Facebook pages. Whether you are new here or not, I am so glad that you decided to click on this video. Please remember to subscribe, like, comment, and share this video so that we can get this important content out there to as many parents in need as possible. Thank you. Let's get into this. All right. So as you can see, if you have seen my videos before, I have a new background, a whole new situation here. So I do not have my sound system hooked up yet in the new office, as promised in one of my latest videos. It is coming, but although it looks very put together behind me, the rest of this office is actually very unkept. There's a bunch of random unpacked boxes, half put together furniture, a bathroom mirror. It's a bunch of random stuff. So we are not fully set up yet, but I will get there. And I'm excited to finally get some better quality sound for you guys in the future. But for now, I appreciate you being here. And today, I'm actually going to share my story. And I feel a little bit narcissistic saying that, but the reality is that I have had a lot of clients and followers on my social media pages who have been interested in really learning about more about my story and why I got into the work that I do. And I find that when I share the full scope of my story with clients and with people, it's encouraging because I have so many people that come to me and they have this concern, and maybe maybe you recognize yourself in this, but they'll come to me with this concern of, I feel like I'm too far gone, like I'm too broken. I'll never be able to get out of this dark place, or I'll never be able to heal. Like I'm just too damaged. I'm damaged goods. And I used to say a lot of that stuff too. I used to think that. And I know that that is not true. And I'm confident that if I can heal, given where I have come from, that you can as well. So with that, let's get into my story. All right, so I'm going to kind of just go off the cuff here. I do have a few notes here to kind of keep me on track, but bear with me. I'm not very organized in this, but basically my story starts in childhood, like all of ours does. So I was born to a mother who really didn't have any stress management skills. She had a lot of trauma herself, and really a lot of stress and kind of traumatic experiences in pregnancy with me. And so, we now know, thanks to the wonders of science, that what we experience, in pregnancy, our fetus, our child, the baby is also experiencing. And a baby's nervous system is formed in relation to their primary caregivers, their mothers, starting at the time of, being in utero. And so I was already kind of set up with a more hyper, or, aroused, kind of very dysregulated nervous system. So then I was born, and my parents had a very volatile relationship. There was a lot of abuse and just really toxic. They were just both very toxic for one another. And so that was taking place during pregnancy, and then of course after I was born as well. So after I was born, my parents got married. I have three older half brothers. So I either share a mother or a father with all of them. I'm the only one that was born to my mother and father. And so I'm the youngest of three older brothers that I grew up with. And the home was it was very violent. There was a lot of violence. And some of my early memories are of me as a very young child, I don't know, 4 or 5, standing in the doorway of my parents' walk-in closet. And I actually have multiple memories of this kind of experience where I'm in this doorway and my mom is kind of cornered up against the wall, and my dad's like in her face yelling at her. And I'm just crying in the doorway saying, "Mommy, mommy." And now the thing to understand though is that while that sounds really terrible against my father, um, it was a volatile relationship on both of their ends. So there was certainly times where my mom was antagonizing him or beating up against his chest. Like there was just violence all around. It wasn't just my father. And um, so my brothers, as they got older, most, not all of them, but two of my brothers, kind of inherited that violence. And so then it wasn't just the volatility between my parents, it was my older brothers as well. So there was always like holes in the walls and in the doors and stuff from, being punched by one of my brothers or being kicked or something like that. There was just so much screaming and yelling and violence and just like throwing things and just a lot of abuse. And so then there's little old me. I'm just little girl Emily, and I was a very sensitive feeling child, and they didn't have time for my feelings. They didn't have space for my feelings. They were so haunted by their own trauma and very emotionally immature adults. And so there wasn't really much in the way of nurturing when it came to my very normal little girl feelings. So I spent a lot of time kind of alone. They would often kind of just send me off by myself. I have memories of me, in the standing in the shower in the dark bathroom, pitch black bathroom. I don't know why I was in the shower in the bathroom. The shower wasn't on, but I was in there. And I think I had just been put in there, I guess, and the shower curtain was closed and the door was closed to the bathroom and it was just dark. And I was just crying and crying and crying. And that's not, it wasn't always that severe, but it was just a lot of emotional neglect. Like there was just no time or space. And so um I am famous for this thing now with my family where I would eventually kind of become cried out, and then but I still hadn't received like what I needed from the loved ones, my parents. And so I remember, and I remember having these thoughts. It's like, maybe if I just keep crying, like they'll realize something's really wrong with me. And so for sometimes hours after I was all cried out, I would just be like moaning. I would just be like, and I would do that for so long, just hoping like if I prolong the cry, they'll realize that I need them. It didn't work. It just annoyed them, and it drove them crazy. It was super triggering for them, of course. And so it just kind of led them to push me away more. So anyway, a lot of verbal abuse, emotional abuse, things like that. I personally was never physically abused, but I witnessed it between other members of my family. So that was the environment that I grew up in. Meanwhile, I'm at school and obviously really struggling with learning because I'm in survival mode all of the time and not experiencing any kind of emotion regulation from any of the adults or older siblings in my family. I do have one really wonderful older brother, but he's so much older than me that I don't really have a lot of memories of him being around very often. He was kind of off either at his mother's house or with his girlfriend. He was a teenager by the time I was born. So um, anyway, so yeah, not the best upbringing. And then, at school, I have I had experiences where my teachers would kind of like, they'd call on me knowing that I couldn't answer the question. And then when I would struggle, they would like humiliate me in front of the class. And so there was like that kind of thing happening, or they'd call me names, they'd call me stupid, tell me I was a slacker, like tell me I was kind of stupid, just incapable and things like that. So there's a lot of that going on as well. Um, and then I also was raised in a huge church. And this isn't to say that all churches are like this. It's certainly not a dig against religion. I have my relationship with God now. Wherever you're at, that's great. But the church that I grew up in was really harmful for me. The adults, they just kind of sent a lot of really mixed messages. And there was a lot of shaming happening, especially as I got into like junior high and teenage years. I always just really got along with the boys. Like I liked skateboarding. I hung out with, skateboarders. I grew up with brothers, so I was just really comfortable with that. Like I loved playing dolls and girly things too, but I also really just loved playing like war and cops and robbers. And so I had, I just really felt comfortable with like being with the guys. And, I was this total goody two shoes. I hadn't even kissed a boy till I was like 16. So, the elders in the church, they didn't know that. They just kind of assumed that because I was hanging out with boys, I must be like a slut. And so there was a lot of shaming and just kind of like trying to keep me away from my friends, in really harmful ways. So there was just not really any place that I ever felt safe. So I become a teen, I'm in my teens now, and unfortunately had experienced repeated, uh, trigger warning here for all of you, um, had experienced repeated sexual assault. And so I had, the first time it had happened, I had shared it with a friend of mine that what had happened. I said, I think this just happened. Like I was trying to push him off of me. I was like crying, saying no, like all this stuff. And like, I just wasn't strong enough. And her response to me was, I know you, and I know you wouldn't let that happen. So I'm sure that's not how it went. And so, I don't fault her. Like we were kids, we were teenagers. That was not the best response at all, but I'm still friends with her today. Like I love her. She didn't know what she was doing. She's a kid. I don't fault her, but it was a really damaging response for me. So at that point, I kind of went into a state of denial. And for a couple of years after that, despite the fact that I was experiencing this repeatedly from a boyfriend, a couple of boyfriends actually, um, I it just sent me into this really, really dark spiral. I was already really struggling with my mental health. Like by the time I was 12, I had told my father, I'd come to my father and I said, what is depression? And he told me what it was. And I said, Dad, I think I'm depressed. And I don't remember that I had gotten any help at that point. But I had started, by the time I was like a freshman in high school, I had started self-harming. So I was cutting a lot, and my mom had noticed that. She never said anything to me, but eventually they got me in to see a therapist. I had been in counseling on and off since they had been divorced, when I was like in fifth or sixth grade. My dad got remarried when I was in junior high. And so I was in and out of counseling, but I didn't even know that my mom knew I was cutting until I saw her filling out paperwork, intake paperwork for a new therapist when I was a teenager. And I remember seeing that she wrote that, yes, I was cutting. And I just felt so, it was just so heartbreaking for me. Like it was this moment where I was like, wow, it like confirmed to me. I was like, she really doesn't care. Because I grew up with this feeling like my parents don't love me, especially after the divorce. Like I was like this ping pong game, or like the ping pong in the game of them just like trying to beat each other, or I felt like I was some like prize, like novelty prize. And it's like, I just never felt loved. Like I just felt like I was in the middle of this. And there was a lot of like talking bad about each other, talking bad about my brother that, my brothers that weren't theirs. It's just, it was just, they were so emotionally immature, and never once could just have the maturity and consciousness to think like, what does our little girl need in all of this? And so it was really all about them. Anyway, so that really confirmed to me. I was like, oh, they really don't love me. Like they know, like she knows that I'm cutting myself, like I'm harming myself. And she has never even said anything to me. Like, how long has she known? Like, what the heck? So anyway, I was in a lot of different, I mean, I went to therapist after therapist and psychiatrists, and was on all kinds of cocktails of, psych drugs, and nothing really ever worked. I mean, I just kind of felt like I was passed from practitioner to practitioner. My experience often was like, I'd go to the psychiatrist, and he'd be like, okay, how are you feeling this week? And I'd be like three words into my sentence of like, well, I've been really struggling with, and then he'd be like, okay, I'm going to change your medication. And so it was just like more confirmation that nobody cared about me. Like they just wanted to put me on drugs, and nobody really wanted to hear me. And I wasn't one of those kids that like didn't talk during therapy. Like I was like stoked. I was like, does somebody want to listen to me? Like, oh my God, yes, I'm gonna tell you all about it. But I just wasn't really receiving that level of care, unfortunately, from the therapist that I was seeing. And if my mom, she was always kind of bouncing around jobs, we moved a ton. So then when insurance would change, or I'd lose insurance or something, should default on payment, whatever it was, like I just would never hear from them again. And there was never any closure. And now as a practitioner, I recognize that that's actually ethically not allowed. Like it's just unethical for a mental health practitioner to do, but unfortunately it happened many times. So by the time I think I was 16 or 17, and at that point, I had already been rushed to the behavioral health center for teens. So there was a mental health facility for teens in the area. I'd already been rushed there on two separate emergency situations. But again, it was just not really helping me. There was just a lot of diagnoses, a lot of medications that didn't work, and not really getting down to the root of what was going on. There wasn't a lot of like, well, what is your home life like? And things like that. And so by the time I was 19, I was living, in across the country from my family, and had a boyfriend, a very abusive, manipulative boyfriend, had been assaulted again by a friend of his, and finally just kind of broke. And so I was diagnosed as a psychotic breakdown. And the experience of that, it was, there was many moments, experiences where I would kind of all of a sudden come to like regain consciousness and realize that I was, in the shower with my clothes on, just like sitting in the shower, laying there and not sure how I got there. Or I was like sitting on the bathroom floor with an open bottle of bleach in my hand and not really sure, like, what, did I drink this? Am I thinking about drinking? Like, what is going on? There was a time where I found myself in the woods behind my house, and I had this like really hateful message carved into my arm that I didn't remember putting there. So there was just like really serious episodes of dissociation happening. And I believed that I had this demon in my mind. And I explained it as like I felt like I was trapped in this cage, dangling from the ceiling of my mind. And I was watching this demon like destroy my life. And he was just so nasty. Like every single moment of the day, it was just the most horrible, abusive, hateful like lines of thinking. Like you're ugly, you're stupid, like you'll never amount to anything, nobody will ever love you, like just horrible things. And I just couldn't get it to stop. And so, I had many attempts at ending my life during that time. I had a lot of suicidal thoughts throughout my teen years, but at that point, I had tried a few times to end my life. Thankfully, it didn't work. And I think the reason it didn't work is because I never really wanted to end my life. It's just that I didn't know how to make the demon go away. Like I didn't know how to make it stop. It was just 24/7 torture. And I think that's why I disassociated. So the one thing that really kept me going during that time is I always wanted to be a mom. Like from the time I was a really little girl, like I stuffed my dolls in my shirt and I pretend I was pregnant. And I had to be a mom. And so going through all of this darkness, I just felt like I have to fight this. And I don't know how, but I'm going to keep fighting, and I have to come through this because I am on this earth to be a mom. Like I am meant to be a mom. I have this contract. Like this is it. Like I just knew I have to be a mom. But if I'm going to be a mom, I have to be healthy. Like I was in a worse situation than my mom was, and my mom was, both my parents, like they were harmful because of how traumatized they were. And I was like, I have to be better than this. And so that was the thing that kept me going and kept me fighting. And so after several months of kind of going through the disassociation episodes and feeling like there was this demon in my mind, I reached out to my mom, and she drove cross country and picked me up and drove me back to California where I grew up. And And the next day she got me into, see behavioral health specialist. At that point, I think I was on like Medi-Cal, so it was, government assistance at that time. I was day one of like returning to the state. And so because of that, they had to get approval for me to be put in, as an inpatient into a mental, some kind of psychological mental ward in a hospital. And so in that time, I was going to my regular doctor who I had seen growing up. And so we went to him and he had me on, more psych drugs, and they put me on like a prescription that normally you would only get in the hospital. And he put me on that. And then basically I had to just come back every single day and check in with them. And the thing that really helped is that I finally had a counselor. So immediately they sent me to a counselor who, for the first time, she sat and she listened to me. She wasn't in a rush. She wasn't looking at the clock. She wasn't asking what my meds were. Like, she just listened. And I felt for the first time like somebody actually cared. And it was life altering to have that. And then the big thing is that she gave me tools. Like, she gave me homework. She didn't just sit there and like have me talk in circles. She was like, okay, well, let's try this and see how that works. And so basically she taught me how to catch myself in my negative thinking and in that inner critic. And she taught me how to like catch it, pause, and then replace it with something that was truthful and real. So when, my mind was going to like, oh, you're such an idiot, you'll never amount to anything, then I'd replace it with, that's not true. I have just as much potential as anybody else. And it was hard at first because I didn't always believe it. And she was like, just lie to yourself. Like, even it, like, it's not a lie, it's actually the truth. But if it feels like you're lying, just say it. And in time, it really helped. And within a few weeks, like finally I had gotten approved to go in the hospital, but they were like, you know what, you seem like you're sort of improving. So let's hold off. And so each week it was like, okay, let's hold off. And after a little while, they were like, okay, you know what, I think we can go ahead and cancel the hospital option. This really seems to be helping you. And I had actually, I did what you're not supposed to do. And I just went cold turkey off of my medications. They never felt right for me. It just instinctually, I was like, they've never helped me. This is not working for me. I feel like they're making me worse. And later, I had another practitioner, a psychologist who, was looking over my whole case, my whole history. And she had basically decided, that, and kind of in retrospect had like diagnosed me with a psychotic break, likely being caused by the psych drugs that I was on. I was on one that is known. Most of them are known for having the potential for these types of episodes for people where they either they have some kind of psychotic episode and they either lash out at others and commit acts of violence against others, often in dissociated states, or they end their own lives in dissociated states. And so that's what is suspected to maybe be part of it. But also I was experiencing a lot of trauma. So,
I just want to interrupt for one quick minute here because I want to add a little disclaimer. For one, just because I found that SSRI as medication was not right for me, I'm not suggesting that it's not right for anybody. And I'm certainly not suggesting that if you take those drugs, there's anything wrong with it or that you need to go off of them. And certainly if you do decide to go off of them, don't do what I did and just go cold turkey. I do want to say that if you are thinking about starting these types of medications, if you are on them and feeling torn, whatever, I just want to make sure that a couple of things. I want everybody to know that your primary care physician is not that, they're not educated enough on the risks and benefits of these drugs. So I highly recommend working with a psychiatrist, somebody who is very specifically trained on these drugs and their risks and benefits. I also really encourage you to find somebody who is open to the reality that these drugs are meant for temporary use. They are not meant for us to be on them long term, like year after year after year after year. So you really want to find someone who understands that this is a temporary thing and that it's really important that you seek out treatment, some kind of recovery option for the root cause of your challenges, of the issues that you're facing. And I'm talking about depression, anxiety. Obviously, there's other disorders that are completely different than this, but for anxiety, depression, we now know, and I'll link a video from somebody even more qualified than me, who has she has great content and great video on, kind of the research that we now have, that shows that depression and anxiety, these are not things that are caused by a chemical imbalance in our brain. There's some other root cause. And so it's really important that just that video is in the description. It's really important that we seek out some kind of tools, some options for actually getting to the root of our issues and not just being on these medications long term, because that's not what they're meant for. So whether it's a trauma therapy, whether it's, getting into your diet, whether it's getting out of a bad situation, there's a number of issues that might be contributing to the challenges that you're facing. And so I just want to encourage you to find a practitioner, to find a psychiatrist who, and a care team that is on board with really helping you and empowering you and giving you those tools to actually find relief and recovery. So that is all I want to say. And again, there's no shame just because this is not what was right for me. If you go a little further in the video, you're going to find out I have a lot of allergies to drugs. So I had a lot of really severe reactions to drugs, to all kinds of drugs, that not everybody has. And when I talk about the risk for kind of worse psychosis from these medications, this is something that you can read on the insert of the drug. So I encourage you to go over these with your psychiatrist, with your pharmacist, whoever. Really put, we live in a world where there's so much information at our fingertips, and I know it can be so overwhelming. So I don't expect you to read all of this on your own and like know what it means, but at least find a practitioner who's gonna be open enough to have those conversations with you. I really want you to understand the risks and the benefits and make sure that you're making a decision that's right for you, and not just seeing a practitioner who just kind of pushes these medications on everybody, whether they're right for you or not, and isn't giving you the proper care and encouragement for treatment beyond the medication. So that is all I wanted to say. And if you want to check out the video, and again, like, don't just rely on YouTube for all of your information. Like, I encourage you also to go look at the research on chemical imbalances, and kind of what is the underlying cause of depression and anxiety and things like that. The video I'm going to link is a great resource, but it's always best to really search out that information as best, so that we have that information right at our fingertips. Don't just take somebody's word for it on YouTube. We always want to, empower ourselves and have that information in front of us, and make the best decisions that we can for ourselves. So that's all I wanted to say. Now back to me.
But anyway, I went cold turkey off meds. Not supposed to do that, but I did. And I just kept seeing that counselor as for as long as I could. And from there, that's what really got me started on my healing journey, because I realized for the first time in my life that there was like tools, that there were things that you can actively do to help yourself. Like, you don't have to just talk, you can actually do more. And so that led me down my path. So I think I was 19, maybe 20 at that time. And yeah, so I kind of did it all. And I had come a long way. The whole process of kind of reframing my thinking, rewiring my mind, it worked, but it did take a really long time and so much work. And I was very lucky that I was young when this happened. And I was at a point where I could just not work, not go to school, and like be supported by my mom. Not everybody has that option when they get to their breaking point. And so I was lucky that I was at that age. So anyway, I did it all. I did, behavioral therapy, I did talk therapy, I did Reiki, I did hypnotherapy, I did EMDR, I did so many things throughout the years. And I got really into like what's it called? Well, I read The Secret, and that was helpful, but also The Power of Now. So I read that one, and then I forget his other book title, but he has another book title, and I read that one. And those were really, really helpful because like I realized that I had this power that I didn't realize I had. So I was on this path of all of that. And then when I was 23, I was in a car accident, and it was like a fender bender. And I I was in this very small little car, and this young teenage boy, he ran his stop sign and so cut me off as I was already going through. And he was like in a huge excursion. And so my whole front end was smashed in, and he had like a dent. But anyway, so that accident, because I saw it coming, my reaction was like, and so I ended up with a back injury. And for 2 years, I was in chronic pain. And, it was kind of, I was at this point where I'm like, okay, my life's like getting better, 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 better. It was still a very slow process. I'd come so far, but I was still really struggling with depression. I still had some anxiety, and that's one thing is like, not only was I dealing with obvious, clinical depression in my teen years, but I had these debilitating uh, anxiety. I had, these horrible panic attacks where I couldn't move. I would physically become paralyzed, and my body would be tingling and be like this. My heart's pounding, like really debilitating panic attacks and anxiety attacks. So wasn't that bad anymore, but I was still struggling with depression. I was still struggling with some anxiety. I was very stuck in the victim mentality still. But I was getting better and better and better. So I'm 23, I got in this accident, and the pain was constant. Like I was always in either pain or discomfort of some kind. And we tried I was in physical therapy for over a year and a half. We tried injections, we tried all kinds of different things. I'm actually allergic to most pain medicines, so there wasn't a lot of options for me aside from codeine. That had just destroyed my stomach, so I couldn't live on, couldn't take that all the time. Um, so we tried everything that we could, but there was really no managing the pain. And so after nearly 2 years of trying to no avail to manage that pain, to get the pain to go away, my care team decided, okay, it's time to settle the case with, the boys' car insurance, because we've done all we can. Your life is going to be pain management at this point. And so, you know, being told at that point, what was I? I was, 25. So being told at the age of 25 that, my life is just going to be pain management from now on, and yet we weren't managing the pain. I knew at that point, okay, I'm probably not going to live to see 30. I'm not going to be able to live with this that much longer. Um, so we settled the case with insurance, and later that day, I got in another car accident. And this time, my car, so I was going around down a steep hill with a sharp turn, and I was a little distracted because I'd come around a turn, a curve in the road at the top of the hill, and there were these kids in the middle of the road on skateboards, like getting ready to go down the road. And I almost hit them. So I was like, oh my God, because I come around a flying turn, and I'm like, oh, where are your mothers? Like I'm all like upset and distracted by these kids. And so I'm going down this hill, and I go around the turn a little too fast, and my back tires, kind of come out from behind me. And so I panic, and I kind of overcorrect. And I was in a Subaru. So, when you have all-wheel drive, I guess, I don't know, maybe this is the case for all cars, but I heard that, because it was all-wheel drive, because I overcorrected, that's why there was a loss of control of the vehicle. And so basically my car was just kind of going back and forth. Like I could see the steering wheel going like this. And there was just no controlling it at that point. And so my car hit a curb. I flipped end to end twice, bounced twice down into a small ravine. And I landed in like the most ideal spot you could possibly land. I landed upright. And just to one side of me was about 100 feet further down into a creek. To the other side of me was a stone wall. And I was in this one tiny patch of grass that was just big enough for my vehicle. Now my car's completely smashed in, like the whole backside is basically missing, and all my things as a nanny at the time. So like all my car seats and everything are strewn about the hillside. But I landed upright. And, had some witnesses They came running down the hill thinking I was going to be dead. And I reading The Power of Now is like the really, that's the thing that got me through that experience, because as I'm experiencing it, I had, of course, I'm terrified. Like I hit my head. I get the airbags never went off, so I hit my head, kind of the top of the door, and I feel myself suspended upside down in my seatbelt, and I realize, oh my God, I thought I was rolling. Oh my God, I'm rolling. Like, I'm gonna die. And I start to panic, and then I remember, wait, the only thing I have control over right now is my breath. And so I closed my eyes and I tried to relax and I just breathed. And when I did that, I felt a presence of like two beings. I have no idea what that was, but I felt this presence and I just knew I'm going to be okay. Even if I die, I'm going to be okay. And so I just kept breathing. And then I landed upright and I'm like, okay, I crawl out of the vehicle and I look at my vehicle and I'm like, I see that it, like half of it is basically missing. And I just like laughed and I was like, really? Oh my God. I'm like looking up at the sky, like, really? And then this woman comes running down. She's like, oh my God, I'm gonna be dead, you know. And then of course, like now it's time to, you know, protect my spine and all the things. And they're calling you know, the ambulance is on its way, all the things. So I go to the hospital and stay there for a while, had a moderate TBI, so traumatic brain injury. And then, you know, was on some painkillers, um, and was sent home. And they were like, okay, you can take the painkillers a little bit longer. And in that time, I'm like, wow, my back is like fine. Like, this is awesome. And my family, you know, and I had a brain injury. So like I had to be cared for around the clock. My mom was about to go on a trip. So I went over and traveled a couple hours to my dad's. And my stepmoms, they took care of me. I basically spent like every day sleeping for most of the time because that was all I could do. And it was quite a journey to heal from that brain injury. And it took about 2 years to fully recover, as recovered as I can be. Um, and so anyway, yeah, you know, my family was kind of like, okay, well, you're gonna have to go off the payments in a day now. And it had finally gotten to this point where I was having some really severe reactions to the codeine, and it was time to go off the pain meds. And I kept saying, I was like, well, maybe like I'll go off the meds and my back won't hurt anymore. And my family was like, yeah, okay, good luck with that. And I'm like, well, I don't know. Like I've heard of crazy things like that happening. And they're like, yeah, well, it doesn't happen in you. Well, I went off the meds and I am that miracle few percent, because the pain didn't come back. It didn't come back. I wouldn't say I was 100% better, but my back was like 85 to 90% better. Like I did have a really sensitive back. Like it was very easily thrown out for quite a few years after that. I had to really be gentle with it. It was not what it was before the accident, but I wasn't in pain all the time. I had got my life back. Yeah, it took me a couple of years to recover from the brain injury, but like I wasn't in pain. And there's a whole lot more I could go into just recovering from the brain injury, but I'll fast forward through that. So basically, you know, after all of that, I had moved out on my own. I was family buddy. Like, okay, I'm gonna move. I moved to Lake Tahoe and was trying to make it on my own, and still had definitely some effects from the brain injury. It was really difficult for me to be in public spaces and things like that. But I was trying to live my life and have the normal life of a, uh, what was I, 25, 26, whatever it was at the time. And so the house that I was living in had really, we didn't know it, but my roommate kept getting sick. And we were like, what's going on? Why is she always sick? And then she found some mold like across, like once she pulled out her bed, she realized there was mold all across this entire wall. And so she kind of bleached it off. And we're like, oh my gosh. So then we check my room and the bathroom, and we realized that basically 3 walls of the house had like 3 different kinds of mold growing in them on the walls. And we just had all this furniture there, so we didn't see. But it was like in our mattresses. It was like in my dresser underneath. You know, it was like everywhere, and it was just spreading. And so it was like three different kinds of pretty standard household molds, but basically when she wiped off the mold, it got into the air, and then I got really sick. And so really, really sick. And so then, here I am still not fully recovered from the brain injury. Now I've got mold toxicity that brought up all kinds of things like mono, like all these different things that came up. It took me months to get the molds fully out of my lungs and out of my bloodstream. And didn't have a voice, literally, like could not speak because I was so sick for a long time. Anyway, was able to recover. But all of this was really, really trying. It was so difficult and was really struggling with the victim mentality and was really struggling with depression through this. And just like, what the heck? Like, okay, I go through this, breakdown, and then I get my life back. And then I get this injury, and then I get my life back. And then I go through this other injury and I'm starting to get my life back. And then I get sick. And it was just like, what the heck? And so I was really just in this dark place again. I was in a really, really, really dark place again. Not as dark as the psychotic breakdown, but pretty darn dark. Well, that's when I had started doing things like EMDR and stuff like that. And so I picked myself back up and I just kept going. I'm like, well, I got to keep going. So I just kept doing what I could to heal. And then my partner and I, we got pregnant. And we were super excited. We wanted this, we were planning for it. And I had figured, you know what, like I did EMDR, like I just kind of was like complacent at that point in the fact that I was still very like in a victim mindset. I just kind of figured I'd always have some level of depression in my life and hadn't really been dealing with anxiety for a long time at that point. So I was just kind of like, okay, this is as good as it's going to get for me. Life will always be a struggle, but like at least I'm good. And so, and in that time, I'd lost my mom. That was really horrible and traumatic. Like there's a lot of other little things that went on in life. um, and so, I was like, okay, I'm gonna be a mom, and I did all this healing. Like I was like, I'm gonna go do more EMDR, and I'm gonna get all the trauma out of the way so that it doesn't haunt my child's childhood the way that my parents' trauma haunted them and robbed me of my childhood. And so I was like, okay, like this is gonna be great. And I had been working in childcare, I've been a preschool teacher, nanny for like 18 years at this point. I started in high school. And so I'm like, okay, great. Like I knew being a mom would be different, but I'm like, okay, I got the knowledge. I'm like, I got the tools, like this is gonna be cool. And then had a traumatic birth experience, unfortunately, led to some breastfeeding issues. I had just lost my dog, who, if you're a dog lover, you get it. But my dog was my baby. And he was actually like he was like a family dog. Then I moved out. So then he was with my mom, and then my mom passed away and I inherited him. And he and I just had a really special bond. We always did, even when I would come to visit my mom, he was like a new dog when I would come to visit. And so he was the one that helped me in the process of grieving for my mom and helped me kind of deal with like the trauma of everything she went through that I had to support her through and everything I went through and making decisions about her health and all of that. And I used to say like he saved me. And so we were so like he was my baby. And we lost him in a really, really traumatic way. It was absolutely horrible. It will always break my heart what that boy went through. And so I basically, it was like I was at my due date when we were going through this with him. My daughter was a couple weeks late. So I was processing that and really grieving for that. And then I had this traumatic birth. Um, and my uncle was also in life support in the hospital at the time. There was a lot going on. So traumatic birth, breastfeeding issues, had a really hard time bonding with my daughter. And surprise, I suddenly was dealing with horrible, horrible, uncontrollable rage that I didn't know I had in me. And I was very shocked by it, but also in retrospect, I'm like, well, I grew up with like really angry, super emotionally reactive, unstable parents and older brothers. So is it any wonder? But I never had anything to trigger that in me. It was always like depression, anxiety, like not anger. And here I am with my newborn and I'm experiencing horrible rage. And I knew that it was wrong. I knew I had to get a handle on it. It was hurting my marriage. It was hurting my daughter's ability to bond, to attach to me in a secure way. It was affecting my ability to bond with her. Like it was bad. And it was scary. There were times where my husband would come and take her away from me because he was afraid I was going to hurt her physically. Uh, and then that, I mean, it made me, I was so out of control. I didn't understand where this was coming from. I wanted to get control of it, but I didn't know how. It was like I was out of my body while I was screaming and cursing at my baby. Um, it was, it was just really, really heartbreaking. It was horrible. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how. I was like, oh my God, I've been a mom for like this much time and I'm already like a monster. Like, how did this happen? I had all these grand intentions of being better than my parents, of being healthier than them. And here I am, I'm hurting her. And I didn't know how I was going to get a handle on it, but I knew I had to. And so I went back to school. That's when I started studying trauma. And I learned a lot of really powerful things. That's where I learned about the internal family systems and child healing. I learned about codependency. I learned about the addiction cycle. I recognized that I had some addictions to some substances that I needed to get a handle on. So I've been sober for a couple of years now. And yeah, it was helping, but I was still really struggling. Like I was like healing, learning to set boundaries, things like that. But I was still so emotionally reactive. Like at the drop of a pin, because she's acting like a toddler does, like I would go from fine to like screaming, just unhinged, screaming, and obviously terrifying her. It was bad. And I had, kind of this pivotal moment with her when she was a baby where I was like, I had scared her so badly, and the look of terror on her face, I was like, I have to figure this out, and that's kind of when I went back to school because I was like, okay, I'm gonna try breathing, I'm gonna try mindfulness, I'm gonna try all the tools that I had, and none of it was working. And so, like I said, I was doing better, but really struggling still with the anger. And um, then our family was we were evacuated due to a wildfire that came within 100 feet of our house. You may have heard of it, the Caldor fire. Um, could have, we thought it was going to take out all of the Lake Tahoe Basin. Miraculously, that did not happen. But it did do a lot of damage. It was a huge, huge fire that burned for a long time. And anyway, so we were evacuated for a couple of weeks, and it was a very stressful time. She had just turned 2, and it was very disruptive for all of us. And I was terrified. Like I didn't know if we had a home to come home to. Um, anyway, so we did. Thankfully, we came home, and after as soon as we got home, my body started trembling. So trembling is kind of like you're shivering, and I couldn't get it to stop. And I was like trying to relax, and I'm like breathing and doing all these things. Once again, trying to pull from all the tools I knew. Nothing was helping. And days went by, and I was trembling and I couldn't stop. I now recognize that that was my body expelling the trauma, just like animals in the wild. They escape the predator, they go, they shake it off, and then they're good, they go. They go on with their life because a traumatized animal is not going to survive in the wild. So they have to expel that trauma. They have to complete that stress response. And so that was my body's way of doing that. But I didn't know. Well, I didn't know that at the time. So I reached out to a coach who specialized in anxiety, and she is the one who introduced me to the world of somatics. Now, I knew about somatics, but I didn't really know exactly what they were and what they entailed. I knew that they could help with trauma, and I knew that like if something having to do with kind of releasing trauma from the body, but I didn't know anything beyond that. So I reached out to her. She introduced me to somatics, and not only was I like no longer trembling, my anxiety was like almost non-existent within like literally like a week of doing some somatic exercises. I did like 3 exercises, a couple minutes a day. And I realized, oh my gosh, you know what? I am not as reactive with my daughter. Like I'm not as triggered as much. I'm just not yelling at her as much. And like, even when I do snap at her, like I feel more in control a little bit. And I was like, wow, there's something to this. And I started doing it with her. I was a stay-at-home mom, so didn't have a whole lot of time away from her. So we started doing it together. I just made it part of our bedtime routine and made it a part of our play. She loved it. And I just made sure that, okay, every single day, I'm going to spend at least a couple minutes doing EFT tapping, shaking, doing sound release, doing some dance, different things. And my life was transforming before my eyes, like in at a speed I had never experienced. I had been on a healing path for, I forget, I think it was at least 18 years at that point. And I had never experienced anything more profound and more fast acting than I had in all those years than I had in that couple of weeks. And I started noticing these changes within a few days. I was like, what is this? Like, this is incredible. So, I was graduating at that point. Shortly after that, I graduated from the trauma recovery program, learning how to be a coach in abuse and addiction recovery. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to dive into the somatic stuff. And I started attending all of the continuing education courses and workshops and different things like that, designed for therapists and coaches and stuff, and doing a lot of reading and all of that, and started just diving into learning what I could. And, in that time, my life transformed. I was like, okay, this is the key. This is the key that I needed to be able to gain control over the victim mentality, the depression, the anxiety, the anger, the emotion regulation. And when I learned about the nervous system, I realized, like, okay, as long as our nervous system is dysregulated and in survival mode, we will never be able to regulate our emotions. We have to feel safe because our emotions are the messages from the nervous system saying, hey, things aren't cool right now. So if we want to get a handle on the anger or on the anxiety or whatever it is, we have to regulate our nervous systems. And so that's what I learned. That's what I became super passionate about. I started sharing it on social media. Never expected my social media to blow up as big as it did. But to my surprise, when I got honest about my anger, and started sharing what I had learned as far as taking power, taking the power back and learning how to regulate. I had mothers all around the world reaching out to me saying, oh my God, I thought I was the only one. I thought I was the only one struggling like this. I thought I was the worst mom. I thought I was a monster. And I get it because I thought those things too. And it's not true. There's a lot of us. There's hundreds of thousands of us all over this world that are struggling. And there is a way out. Okay, there's a way through the anger, there's a way through the depression, the anxiety, the depths of despair that trauma can put us in. There is a way out. And I'm not going to promise you that it's, quick or easy or anything, but I do know that I have found really powerful tools. And I'm really passionate about sharing them with you here. That's why I share many of them for free here on YouTube and on my social media pages. I have free resources on my website as well. My book walks you through the process of learning to self-regulate. And I have so many other courses in the child healing course. I have so many other resources, coaching, and more that I'm working on. And I do all of this because I know that you can do it. And I know that you're worth it. And I know that you owe it to yourself, you owe it to your kids, if you have kids. But I just know that if I can come back from the dark places that I have been and now live a life that I couldn't even dream about this. I couldn't have even dreamed that my life would be so wonderful that I mean, of course, life is hard. I lost my dad, like traumatic things happen, like it's still hard, but I have the tools to be able to process it fully in that time, to sit with the feeling and then let it go and not have it be one more trauma in my life. And so, there's resources for you, and whether I'm the right person for you or not, there's somatic experiencing, There's neurosomatic work, which is some of what I do. There's so many different kinds of somatic healing. There's art therapy, EMDR. There's so many wonderful options for you out there. And there's community. Okay, and that's something I'm working on creating as well as community. So stay tuned. And I'd love for your feedback. You if you're still here watching this to the end, I appreciate that. I know this is a long one. And thank you so much for holding space for this. I am prepared for potential haters in the comments. That's okay. I'm used to that, but I'd love your feedback, whether you comment, reach out to me, via email, whatever you feel comfortable with. I'd love to know how my story touched you in any way, if it did. And yeah, good luck on your healing journey. You are not alone. And you absolutely, absolutely can do this. There are resources for you. And if I can help you find them, please let me know.